Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming back and joining us. I hope you all had a good lunch. I had pot stickers in case you were wondering. I'm going to do a quick intro now. So we're going to be hearing from Nicole Richard, who will be presenting on the preventive control of subgroups and their objectives and goals. Nicole is a research associate and food safety specialist with the University of Rhode Island's Graduate School of Oceanography. Nicole, if you want to take it away.
Hi, I'm not with oceanography. I'm with College of Environment and Life Sciences.
I am so sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm in the Fisheries, Animal Science, and Veterinary program or college department. Steve and I'm having trouble. And my lunch was not nearly as exciting. I had my children's leftover sandwich, but it sufficed. It's all I have. So anyway, today I'm going to talk about preventive controls for human food, the work groups, and how we got here. I've been involved with the work groups from the beginning, so I volunteered to just share this with everyone so that everyone can be up to speed when we talk about the work group work, so that you'll know how we got to what we selected to work on and what we're doing. Okay, hold on. Okay, so just to make sure we're all on the same page, I'm talking about the current good manufacturing practices, hazard analysis, and risk-based preventive controls for human food, regulation. We also call it preventive controls for human food. And in my presentation, you might see it abbreviated as PCHF. So just to sort of set the stage, this all started with the Food Safety Modernization Act that was signed into law in 2011. What you see listed on this slide are a bunch of the rules that are out under FSMA, and what we're talking about is specifically the preventive controls for human food rule. Training alliances were also formed to support the educational components that might be needed for these regulations as they come out. These training alliances are comprised of industry, academia, and regulatory partners, and they've developed standardized training curriculums. So for preventive controls for human food, we have the Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance. So the FSPCA developed this standardized training curriculum for preventive controls for human food. It's recognized as the standard curriculum recognized by FDA. It aligns with the FSMA preventive controls for human food rule, and this curriculum provides education regarding risk-based preventive controls. Some of the challenges that we're seeing are encountered among the less experienced small and medium scale processors when they're taking this training. At the same time, all the FSMA was coming out and the training alliances were coming out. The FDA and USDA funded the development of a national center as well as 4 regional food safety centers. And the goal of these centers was aimed at improving coordinated training, education, and outreach efforts related to food safety and compliance with FSMA, specifically around the produce safety rule and preventive controls for human food. So our organization is NECAFS, the Northeast Center to Advance Food Safety, and NECAFS is here to focus on coordinating and facilitating our Northeast regional network to support a national food safety training, education, extension, outreach, and technical assistance systems among small and medium-sized producers and processors, specifically around the FSMA produce safety rule and FSMA preventive controls for human food rule. So that's sort of how we got here. Every year, NECAFS offers this conference, which provides an opportunity for us to sort of meet in person and discuss activities that are related to the preventive controls for human food. So back where this, oops. So now that's sort of the background, and now just, I'm sorry, I print out my slides as I move because sometimes I can't see the screen, so I'm just trying to catch up. So back where this all began in 2018, at the second annual NECAFS conference, a group met to specifically talk about preventive controls for human food. And the goal was to build a cohesive strategy to address the needs of small to medium-sized food processors impacted by the FSMA preventive controls for human food rule. This goal was, the objective of this preventive controls focus meeting was to have a facilitated group discussion to determine successes, challenges, and opportunities regarding the preventive control for human food standardized curriculum training program. And the outcome of this meeting was to determine priorities or focus areas for immediate group work. So what we found at this meeting, in essence, was that small and medium scale facilities with less food safety experience struggled more in understanding how the FSMA preventive controls for human food regulation impacted them. They struggled more when they were attending these FSPCA training curriculums because they had less food safety experience. And so like we spoke about this morning, it was almost, some of them are like a deer in the headlights in these classes. And we need to find ways to help them so that when they attend this class, they're better prepared. The less experienced processors struggled finding reliable resources for help and knowing where to go to for training and help. And that we also discovered there was a need for a regional coordination of preventive control for human food related activities. So this coordination effort is going to be led by NECAFS personnel, but the first bullet, helping the small and medium scale processors was where we were going to focus our group work. And based on that findings of this meeting that we had that specifically focused on preventive controls, we identified 3 priority areas to focus on, and we termed them awareness, resources, and evaluation. And I'm going to discuss each of these in more detail. Before we adjourned, we identified work group leads for each priority, and we identified volunteer work group partners for each priority. And then at subsequent conferences, we would open it up for new volunteers to join the work groups if anyone's interested. So we try to keep it open and allowing for people to get involved pretty easily. So awareness became the awareness campaign work group. And the goal of this work group was to increase awareness of the FSMA preventive controls for human food regulation, especially among small and medium scale facilities. So essentially each work group met, and based on the discussions and the notes from this conference, this goal was the primary goal identified by the awareness work group. They're going to accomplish their goal by identifying food safety communicators in the Northeast region, developing a portfolio of outreach awareness products, and disseminating the products to the communicators. So they're going to hear more about why they identified the communicators and about the outreach components that are being developed later. I'm not getting into the details of each work group. I'm just sort of giving the overview of how they formed and where they're at. We also identified the resources as a need and called this the Roadmap to Resources work group. The goal of this work group is to build a catalog of resources under defined categories specific to the needs of small and medium scale facilities impacted by the FSMA preventive controls for human food rule. So this will be accomplished by creating content category content outline, identifying and pooling resources for each category, and designing and electronically publishing and distributing this resource roadmap to resources resource. And then finally, the evaluation work group became the evaluation training to implementation gap analysis work group. And the goal of this was to identify knowledge gaps that were contributing to difficulties that people were encountering when they were taking the FSPCA preventive controls for human food training. And so in order to identify these gaps, we decided that we would need to develop a training evaluation tool, promote regional usage of the tool, and then identify, we could use the results of this evaluation tool to identify what supports might be needed for compliance with the rule, and tie in with the resource work group in terms of identifying resources that are already developed or identifying resources that maybe aren't developed yet that could lead to future work. So just overall, from when we started until last year, this is what we've done. So, in our first year, we identified focus areas or priorities and established our work group leads. In the second year, we realized that we needed more help to really push these work groups along, and we hired 2 project coordinators and formalized the plan of action for the work groups. So last year essentially was implementing the work group's plan of action, and this year we will be hearing about a lot of the progress that's been made by each of the work groups. And that brings us to today and tomorrow, where we will hear about the project updates. And then looking forward. So in looking forward with these work groups, evaluation will pretty much we'll primarily be looking at promoting usage of the evaluation tool and getting some of the preventive control for human food educators on board to use this evaluation tool through NECAFS so that NECAFS can collect regional data. And NECAFS will be providing a data analysis. So as a, to entice instructors for using this evaluation tool, they can get a printout of the results and get a comparison of, how their class and maybe how they fare to the region. We haven't fully hashed that out, but we will provide output. The roadmap to resources will be published, and in the process of putting that together, they'll hopefully be able to identify some resource gaps that occur, and then in the future, through the evaluation, we'll be able to identify other resource gaps, hopefully. Awareness is going to be rolling out a postcard that educators can use to inform processors of FSMA and the educational programs that are available in the region. And they're working on a portfolio of products that will emphasize the NECAFS website. So we'll hear more from Amanda and Luke later about that. The website is being worked on that will, it offers a lot around produce safety, and we're trying to build up what is being offered around preventive controls for human food. So that's being worked on. And we also hope in this meeting today and tomorrow to identify new priorities or focus areas for future work, since we're sort of wrapping up the first set of priorities that we identified. And that is how we got here. Does anyone have any questions or need any clarification on any of the work?
Thank you so much for that, Nicole.
You're welcome.
Give it a second or two. I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but otherwise, if anyone doesn't have questions, we can then step forward to the next part of the preventive controls meeting. I'll give you all a minute. Hearing no objections. All right, Nicole, if you want to stop sharing your screen, and that'll give Beth a second to get set up. So we'll be presenting next from the resources subgroup. It is myself and Elizabeth Demings. Elizabeth is the program coordinator for the Institute for Food Safety at Cornell University. And to reintroduce myself, I'm Annie Fitzgerald. I'm a research specialist with NECAFS. Beth, if you want to take it away.
Can you see the presentation?
Oh, yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. So Nicole gave a great introduction to kind of set the stage for what we're going to talk about today. And the project we've been leading, working on, is the roadmap to resources. So I just wanted to start with some acknowledgements. So this is sort of our volunteer subgroup for the Northeast. And we've had a lot of people volunteer their time throughout, since 2018 to work on this project. And so I just wanted to acknowledge all of their contributions. Some folks have moved on to other things, but I still mention them here. And and then a lot of these members have still been active. Early on, we hosted a lot of regular meetings, especially as we were developing our proposal for this project. And we kind of tailored off a little bit in the past year. We've been getting some things set up. And then what we had happen was that Annie joined the team, and she's been really instrumental in pushing this project forward. So we've made a lot of progress in the last couple of months. And so I anticipate in the coming year, we'll want to lean more on some input from folks who are interested in participating in this. So if you are interested in anything that you see today and you want to participate more in this project, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is up here, and then I'm sure it'll be made available for later on if anybody wants it. You can also put a message in chat and I can share my email. So just a quick project summary. I think Nicole just talked about this, but our problem was that we had sort of these small processors who don't know how to find resources, or they're just not aware of any of the existing resources that are out there on the Preventive Controls for Human Food rule. And so our solution is to develop this sort of roadmap so that we can direct all of these small processors that are impacted by the rule to these relevant resources. And the action required to do this is to build this into a comprehensive website that's going to have a catalog of these resources under very defined topics that the small processors are looking for information. And so I'll just provide sort of a brief overview in this talk of what we've done, sort of where we are right now, and then what's happening next. And then I'm going to jump off and Annie will take over, and she is going to give you a quick look at the website that is under development. And then at the end of this talk, and after Annie's done presenting the new website design, we're going to go into some breakout rooms. And I'm going to ask all of you to help address some questions so that we can gather additional content and information for some of the content that we're building into this website. Because it's a NECAFS website, but it really represents everyone in the Northeast. So we do want everyone's input on it. And so I'll go ahead and talk about what we've done so far. And we started this by developing sort of a content outline that included a draft list of resource categories. Those categories we finalized in 2019. We had input from our meeting participants when we did presentations and we put out these proposals for these specific projects. And essentially there were two sort of groups of categories that we defined. And the first group of categories that we defined are really specific to the Preventive Controls for Human Food rule. So they're things like complying with the PCHF rule, GMPs, allergens and your allergen control programs, developing sanitation SOPs, developing a food safety plan, validation studies and processes and process controls, production specifications, and then information about environmental monitoring program. And then the second sort of resources that we saw that were needed was information about your state and local regulations that may not necessarily be covered by the rule, but small processors are still need to follow state and local regs. And then even extension and consulting services and resources that are available. So in the Northeast, but also beyond the Northeast, if there are things that are available, remote or online. And funding opportunities, which is something if we can put small processors in touch with those opportunities that might be out there for them. And then finally, just a directory of services. Which is essentially just contact information for extension, for folks in extension, for consultants, and for others. And so those are the categories. And if you recall from last year's meeting, for anyone that was there, we had this resource available, and we went through and we put together these descriptions. And I'm going to go ahead and post this. To chat, there's a link to the full document if you're interested in reviewing it. And we finalized these categories and these descriptions. And really the descriptions were important so that we define these categories and kind of create parameters that we could use for our online search for these resources and to keep it as a very targeted guide. So the tool overall isn't intended to be all-encompassing of everything that's out there, but it's really meant to be sort of refined. And so having these descriptions in mind is really key to kind of honing it in. and keeping these parameters resolved. And then as we were building this, the question kind of came up was how can we trust the resources that we're actually going to be including on this site and on this roadmap? And so we decided to create a rubric so that we could assess both not only the relevance, but the quality and the content of the resources that we are selecting. And what we started with, Amanda Kinchlow was very generous and put us in touch with a project that her group was working on to look at videos online. And so she had developed a rubric. And so she gave us that to start out as a template. And so we used that as a basis to develop this rubric. And the rubric included sort of an initial just resource citation and category. So we're able to catalog the information that we're collecting for the resource. And then rubric also starts with an initial screening just to establish that the resource is actually applicable, so that it's a credible source, it has current information, it's something that stakeholders would actually want to use. And then after sort of establishing that it is a relevant resource, then the assessment goes on to look at both the quality and content. And so it's important, this rating is using a Likert scale by the person using the rubric, and they rate quality as it pertains to be clear so that it's like easy to view. So this would be images and graphics, and then it rates the content, making sure that it's effective and it provides really clear explanations. So, so one example would be if the resource is science or regulatory based, then it's going to explain these terms or scenarios like in plain language so that the small processor who may not necessarily have a scientific or regulatory background is really going to understand what it's saying. And the overall goal, is that these resources provide effective, usable information. And so we want to make sure that they have diagrams or graphics or videos or examples that really make that material understandable. And the final assessment and recommendation is just looking at the pulling together an overall quality and content rating. And these ratings could be anything from an exceptional resource down to a poor resource. And then we give a final recommendation. And there is, in that final recommendation on the rubric, there is a part where there's a placeholder where you can put notes and talk about why it's been excluded, or if it's unsure if it's a good fit to use. And this is just a picture of the front page of the rubric. And I also have a link to the final rubric that we have been working with. So there's a link in the chat if you want to reference it. And so that's how we're kind of vetting these resources. So like I said, we had Annie join us in October, and this kind of brings us to date where we're at. So we came up with our categories and our descriptions of the resources that we kind of wanted to include. And then we developed the rubric so we know how to vet these resources. And now it brings us to where we're actually looking at these resources online. And this is what Annie's been spending her time since October working on. And it's pretty impressive. She's already looked at 284 different online resources and vetted it against the rubric. And she's cataloged these resources. So she has information like the reference information. It has the citation link. So the source of information, the date of the publication. She also put in a summary as well as some keywords. So it's a pretty thorough catalog that we have. Of the 284 online resources that she found, 169 of them would be recommended for including on the website. And of that 169, 106 of the resources fall under categories that are specific to the PCHF rule. So it's like on GMPs or allergens or how to comply with the rule. And then 63 of those resources fall under the sort of additional categories. And then altogether, she excluded about 115 of the resources that she had pulled up. So we'll take a closer look at some of these resources that were recommended, and then I'll switch over and talk about why some of those resources that she found were excluded. So here's just a chart of the total. This has the actual number count of each resource out of 106. Here's the list of the resources that are specific to the preventive controls for human food rule. And we found that most of the resources that she found that were going to be included is about 29% of them are the ones that would comply with the preventive controls for human food rule. And then in her search, there was limited information found on for allergen and allergen control programs, production specifications, and then also environmental monitoring programs. So those are kind of at the lower end of things. And then looking at the additional resource group of categories, so your state and local regs, your extension and consulting services, funding opportunities, and directory of services. The directory of services really isn't applicable at this stage because this is going to be sort of a voluntary sort of directory that you can put your name into if you want to be part of it. And funding opportunities, I haven't found many of those that are available for small processors. So this is something that we want to work on. And then the extension and consulting services, you can see that's the bulk. So there's 40 of those. And these are mostly training or workshops that are offered by extension services in the Northeast. And I think some are outside of the Northeast as well, as long as they're remote. And so, so this is where we stand with that. And then what's interesting is to look at reasons why some of these resources were excluded. So the ones that she vetted that didn't make the cut were ones that were mostly, they were not appropriate or relevant for our target audience, for small processors who may or may not have to comply with the preventive controls for human food rule. And then the other big reason is that they were just too ambiguous. So they didn't provide enough detail. They were just more, they were too vague. They didn't have enough information. So those were the main reasons why they were excluded. And just some outcomes from this initial online resource search. We kind of came up with 3 takeaways from this initial search. And the first is that we're lacking resources under some of these categories. So we'll really need to tailor the rest of the search to address some of these gaps that we've identified. So for example, like not having very much information on allergens. So we'll see if we can get some more information on that. The second takeaway is that we identified that there's this need to include some additional categories or subcategories. So like we didn't have HACCP as a separate category. It could fit under your food safety plan, but there were a lot of resources for that. And then another one was on pest management plans. So that also falls like under, with your pest management could fall under your GMPs. But there were things of that nature that probably need to be included as additional categories, because these will also be things that small processors are going to need resources for. And then the third takeaway is that we discovered that while we're sort of doing this categorization of these resources, is that some of these can be cross-listed and they can fall under multiple categories. So, so for example, like your environmental monitoring program, you know, that could be a separate category that you're actually doing that direct search for, but it also, again, could follow under developing a food safety plan and being part of that food safety plan. So, so these are some of the things that we need to address moving forward. And our next steps in this project will be completing the search, and then we're compiling resources under some of the selected categories. We'll have to finish building the website. Annie's going to show you the website next, so you can kind of see this is the very first draft of it. So we'll need to work on that website. So the website is part of this project, in that in order for us to launch this project, we need to have a website to put it on. So that's exciting that we have the website going. And then we want to pilot this, both the website and the roadmap to resources, hopefully late summer, early fall. And we're going to want to develop a survey so that we can assess the usability and design of it, the accuracy and usefulness of the resources that are posted. We'll want to identify some of the gaps in the resources, so what's missing from the site, what's missing from the roadmap, and then take in suggestions to improve both the design and the content aspects of it. And we plan to solicit feedbacks from all of you on this call, our collaborators and NECAFS, extension educators, regulators, consultants. And then we also want to pilot it with our target audience, which are the small processors. So once we get this information back and we're able to update the site, then we'll get that website launched. And once we've completed this project, I guess we're going to be moving on to some new projects, and maybe looking at even developing some new resources that can fill in some of the gaps that we've identified. So with that, I will hand this over to Annie. I'll stop share, and she's going to go through the website. Annie, you're on mute, so we can't hear you.
Thank you so much. I just said a lot of words there that nobody could hear. I was going to say thank you, Beth, for covering all of this, and thank you, folks, for your warm wishes on this project. It has been really fun, and I've learned a lot along the way, and so I hope we can share some of it with you. Can you see my website here? Perfect, thank you. So here is our preventive controls for human food site. I think it's beautiful, in my humble opinion. I think our web developer, Pete, did a really good job, but as Beth said, this is still an early draft of it, so there's gonna be a lot of revisions that it'll go through. And right now, a lot of it is just sort of roughed out and giving you a sense of what things will do, but we don't have a lot of the functionality yet. So two major themes as we developed this site were, one, we wanted to accommodate a lot of different types of information seeking behavior. I think when it comes to web design, oftentimes people think there's like one very intuitive way to do things, and that's just not true. Like if you're gonna make a cake, you might go online or read a book, or like you call your mom because she makes really good cake. There's so many ways to do things, and none of them's the right answer. And in the same way, when we started on this site, we wanted it to have options. The other thing is, oh, sorry, Amanda.
Be able to increase the viewpoint of your
I can do that.
And by the way, sometimes I just cave and order a cake at the bakery.
That is also a fair way to do it.
It's an option.
So the other major thing we needed to consider in the site was the 12 categories that Beth outlined. This is sort of our overarching informational theme, and it's something that you're going to see kind of crop up again and again. So to quickly walk you through the site, or maybe not that quickly, we'll see. The first thing I want to point out is this menu. You know how a menu works, but it's going to be foreshadowing for later when I talk to you guys about the menu, so just know that it's there. And then the first choice we give users is these three categories: the roadmap to resources, which is sort of a guided walk through some of the resources that we've outlined. It's built on the 12 major categories that were identified, but it also gives people reference articles if they want to understand those topics a little more in depth. Templates and forms is information that is specifically actionable. It's things like a guide on how to create a food safety plan, sample food safety plans, what do your sanitation SOPs need to look like, things that somebody can take and immediately run with and start building things. And then the third section, Connect to a Professional, is a directory of resources of food safety communicators, I think is the preferred term, but experts, academics, consultants, and people in the field who are willing to lend their knowledge to processors and really understand what they need to be doing and where they need to be looking for more. So right now these aren't live, but I think that's going to be a really good option for somebody who's really just looking for what their final resource is. The other way that people can kind of look at this information is, what am I trying to learn about? What are these 12 topics? And so we can take you through to look at complying with the PCHF rule. So this is the general landing page for resources that we've gathered. These are just sample resources. They don't necessarily have to do with complying with the rule. But we've again sort of broken it down into these 3 sections. If you're a regular user of the site, which we hope we'll have this section of new resources, sort of a general catch-all. And then again, we have this option of action items, of things that people will be able to take and implement right away. This idea of breaking it down into these 3 specific topics is definitely something that's still under discussion. And we're definitely evaluating what's going to be the most effective way to convey these resources. So it's something we'll be thinking about in the coming months. We also have ways for people to keep navigating the site from here. So you'll have a drop-down menu that'll be these 12 categories, and then there'll be a search bar as well. So people can just do a classic keyword search based on what they're looking for to find information. This brings us back to this menu. So again, we have this running theme that people always have a place to orient themselves no matter what page they're on. One of the important things is we'll have the drop down of those 12 categories again. So if you're like, oh, I don't actually care about complying with the PCH rule, what I need are sanitation SOPs right now, you'll be able to get there very quickly. You don't have to navigate back to the home page. We also have another facet. If people have a more inquisitive approach, we'll have the FAQ, and we'll put, this is something we're really still researching, and I'm very excited to develop the FAQ over time, but it'll be a good way for people who just need quick questions, who really are trying to get their feet wet in the topic and understand these bigger themes, to be able to go to that section and then be directed to resources in that way as well. Besides that, we have the ever thrilling about us and contact information. So as we look at these resources, we've got the quick summary, and then if you click on an actual resource, oh, actually, let me take you to the other one. It's a little prettier. It gives you this metadata that's more useful if you are sort of in the field, but not a processor. So for people like those on this call, you might be more interested in knowing the year and the source. And then you have this link that'll take you directly to the materials itself. Besides that, we've got a whole keyword tagging system of related topics. So especially if you're sorting by food type, this is going to be particularly relevant. You'll be able to click on the keyword and it'll take you to other resources that are also tagged with that keyword. And so it's a way to go outside of those 12 topics and still really do a detailed information search based on what you're more interested in. And then this is sort of, as Beth was talking about, we might kind of start looking into subcategories and how we're going to break down this information a little bit further. And so that's something that's still very much in the works that we're going to figure out as time goes on. I'm trying to think what else I need to show you guys, but I think that really covers most of it. The site is still up and coming. You can see like our images are still roughed up. A lot of the links aren't quite there yet, but it's getting to a place where we're really going to be able to have this resource that is really helpful for processors, and two, that we hope people can share very easily and sort of point people in the direction of this tool that'll be helpful for everyone. So I think, Beth, I'm going to hand it back over to you if you want to go over how we'll be doing our breakout groups. We're really excited to get feedback from you guys and get your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Annie. So yes, I saw a lot of chatter in the chat box, how excited everyone is about this resource. And I think, yeah, we're really excited to see it come to fruition. And I think it will be a great resource for our group and for our stakeholders as well. I think we still have a little, like maybe another minute. I know we're running a little early. I don't want to make us go late because of me, but Luke did ask a question in the chat that I think I'll just answer real quickly. How does the peer review process differ from the clearinghouse process? And I'm not entirely sure how the peer review process works for the clearinghouse. So I think that's something I'd have to ask Elizabeth. Is there anyone on the call that knows that specifically? I know that I think it's multiple people might get.
Yeah, I can speak to that briefly, Beth. I'm not an expert in it entirely, but if you remember that there's 4 FDA regional centers, we're the Northeast, and one of the other regional centers, I believe it's the Western Center, took ownership of vetting the peer review process for entry into NECAFS, so into the clearinghouse, excuse me. It's the clearinghouse. I keep calling it the NECAFS clearinghouse, but it's not. It's now called the Food Safety Clearinghouse because it's all the regions. And so you're able to post anything that we as food safety communicators feel relevant to be posted on the clearinghouse can be done. But if you want this emblem to indicate that it was in fact peer reviewed, that's a separate entity. So it's marked in some way that kind of gives a heightened scrutiny because it has undergone the peer review process. And on the flip side of that, as I understand it, they are looking for reviewers, and this is happening right now. And I have a feeling we're going to talk about this tomorrow, but I'm stealing the thunder of someone else's updates. But they're part of the process is including payment to the reviewer to entice people to help review our content, right? Our content review is only as good as us all taking the time to give the real feedback. And so recognizing that that takes time, there's some sort of honorarium. I have no idea what the details are, but Beth just posted it, the clearinghouse itself in the chat box, but that's the length of what I know.
Yeah. So yeah, and I guess the process here that's different is that we created a rubric just to vet resources, and Annie's really been the one to do that work. So I mean, I don't think we've really done a call out for people because a lot of the people that are involved in our subgroup are supposed to take more of an advisory role and input and drive rather than kind of do the meat and potato work, I guess.
Yeah, well, and I guess, and Beth, I think one thing that your group has always been very clear about, and the scope of this project, it's not to create new resources, but leverage the existing ones. And I think I'm so excited about it because now we're able to see gaps, which foreshadowed to the conversation at the end of the day is about future program opportunities.
Yeah. And the other thing is also, I guess I should elucidate the difference between the clearinghouse resource and the resource that we're building. So our resource is really for small processors. So we're trying to pull resources that they can use. And the clearinghouse is really just like everything and anything. So it's resources. And it's also, I think, geared more towards the extension educators building out resources. And I don't know if you'd necessarily send your small processor to the clearinghouse to get information. So that's one of the differences, because we do plan on sending small processors to these resources and to the roadmap to resources. So we're going to be doing these breakout sessions. So we hope that you all stay on for this. They've been pre-assigned based on the attendance list. We have 4 facilitators, so there'll be 1 facilitator per breakout group. And we have 3 discussion questions that you'll be addressing. We need someone to volunteer in each group so that they can take notes. And we have a Google Sheet that each group will be using to record their input into. And then when we have half an hour for this breakout discussion, the conference organizers are going to put us into our breakout groups, and they are going to give us a 2-minute warning when our breakout session's about to end, so that we'll kind of all know. And then my understanding is we'll get sent back here, and then we'll be able to discuss the food safety outreach program. So I do think we're running ahead of time, ahead of schedule. So we're going to just keep the discussion at 30 minutes. But just to remind you that then we'll come back in and we'll start talking about the food safety outreach program. Annie, are we missing anything?
I think that covers everything. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And
All right, so okay, folks, it's 2:32. We have 2 more things for the day. Again, my name is Amanda Kinchla from UMass, and we're going to have a discussion on FSOP, and I'll explain that in a second. But before we do, I can see you're starting to get a little tired. Hang with me, because we want to have a discussion about potential collaborations and hopes and dreams for future projects. And then after that is the networking session. And so just as a sidebar, I want to remind you to attend. It's a little bit weird on these tables, but we did one this morning and it was actually pretty fun. So I encourage you to stay and try to take a moment to have a socially awkward social hour with our food safety peeps. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen here. Give me a second. You can see my screen. I have a pop-up that is blocking my screen here. Give it a second, sorry. You know, you get an email and then it sits in that corner and I can't block it out. Okay, if that's happening. All right, so this isn't intended to be super presenty. I just want to kind of set the stage for those that might be new to NECAFS in general. There's a funding program sponsored through the USDA, and it's known as the Food Safety Outreach Program Grant. And we routinely add another acronym to the alphabet soup, and we just call it FSOP. And so I just wanted to take a moment to let you all know about this grant. And based on that call specifically, the awards intended to develop and implement develop trainings, or execute education, or provide extension, outreach, and technical assistance projects. And in general, the target audience is pretty wide, but also very specific. So it's open to small and medium-sized farmers, socially disadvantaged farmers, and I did a shout here, small processors, as well as fresh fruit and vegetable merchants. And it includes a lot of applicants can be included, including local communities or non-governmental organizations, food hubs, cooperatives, farm cooperatives, extension, and other local groups. So we wanted to take a time today when we're in person, we kind of have this moment to just kind of hang out and use the poster session as a fuel for discussion and kind of find new networks. But what in this world of virtual, we wanted to just take pause and remind you all that the call was posted in January and the submission date is Thursday, April 1st. So I have the link here of the actual details of the RFA, but I wanted to just give it a moment today to let you know that it's coming and to see if there's any potential collaborative interest at large. So in general, there are 3 categories of this call. There's a program called the Community Outreach Project. That one is about $80,000 to $150,000 for a 2-year program. And then there's one about collaborative education and training projects. That's larger money, more for curriculum development type of components, for $200,000 to $400,000. And both of those 2 projects can be increased to a larger pool of money with an additional $150,000 if they have additional collaborative engagement supplements targeted to different hard to reach audiences. And then on the right, we have the last one is the regional center. So NECAS, the Northeast Center of Advanced Food Safety, we are presently funded through the regional center, and our program is up for renewal this coming cycle. So shamelessly, one of the things that Elizabeth likes to look at, and some of the reasons why we have these these breakout rooms is so that we can get our facts straight of where our opportunities in the future lay, and we try to cater to our audience better and leverage resources so we can, as Chris Callahan always says, sustain good work. So this isn't a whole host of different projects, but here's just a little taste of some that of the projects that have been funded in recent years. And you can see the titles up here, but I wanted to just take a moment to kind of give a shout out to some folks that I believe are here in the room, and if you kind of give a taste of the project. Again, the idea here isn't to give the whole story here, but just kind of give a little vibe of the types of projects that have been funded in the past, so that in a moment we're going to have a discussion about how we might be able to think about future projects. So with that, can I give a shout out? Sam Alkane, you want to give a quick synopsis of your project?
Yeah, so our project is basically, like everyone talked about earlier today, when small processors go through the preventive controls for human foods curriculum, they kind of come out with their eyes like really big, like how the heck do I tackle this? So, and especially for our small dairy producers, because I'm a dairy food safety and extension person. And so what we decided what we wanted to do was actually sit down with these small processors and then help them look through the food safety plan, walk them through that on their own particular facility. So it was focused on dairy with dairy examples. And so basically we simplified some of the lectures from the FSPCA material and then extended out breakout sessions. So we'd have about 2 to 4 coaches in a room with around 10 to 20 participants. And then in each of those sections, we would jump in and then help them walk through, right? Going through their hazard analysis, or talking through their preventative controls or their process controls or their allergen controls, and really answer questions, help them put some pens to paper, not completely do the plan for them, but really more of an in-depth discussion around the problems and issues that they would face as dairy people with the preventive controls. And so we did that nationally in person, worked with different universities, like Amanda was there for one that we did in Connecticut last year before everything shut down. We've gone to Oregon, Minnesota, Iowa, all over the place. And it went really well. COVID kind of messed some things up. What we're in the process of doing right now is, with some of the people that we worked with, we're actually recording some of those lectures so that they'll be available online. And then I've also been doing a lot of COVID outreach now because of COVID-19. And we've been doing this office hours thing very regularly. And I think it works really well for opening up engagement and questions. And so instead of doing breakout sessions, doing office hours on specific topics of the food safety plan, so people from all over the country can call in, and we're going to test to see how that works out this spring. And that's one area that I'm interested in thinking about. How do we cohesively do that nationally, maybe for an NECAFS grant or something like that.
I love that. Stay tuned. Hold on your britches, Sam, because I'm going to bring that back in a moment. Excellent. Thank you. Megan, can I give you a shout out? I didn't tell you I was going to, but I'm throwing you in. Welcome. Can you give a little tutorial on your project?
Yeah, so West Virginia leads the nation in small family-owned farms, and we also only have one co-packing facility. So as we were developing this project, we were able to make a GIS database that's CFS link, westvirginia.com for community food systems link. So we were able to identify the agriculture clusters to be able to target our education. So we've been working on a Recipe to Reality series to be able to help producers understand the training and also the labeling requirements associated for that, as well as adding some additional lessons to our Market Ready program as well. And so we had to take it all online, and then also see different legal resources that some of our folks might need to be able to rent out the shared kitchen spaces as well. So we were able to address some problems, but then identify a slew of new problems to be able to work on too. So we are going to be offering BPCS for free, targeting veterans this summer with our Department of Ag. So we're trying to be able to use that as a pipeline into our education program, since we weren't able to do some of our conferences for recruiting. A large part of the state doesn't have broadband access, so that's also a barrier to getting and disseminating our information out there. Yeah, but I encourage you to check out cfslink.gov.com. I'll put it in the chat there. And we're always looking for collaborators as we do not have a process control authority in the state. So that also limits a lot of the activity that we can do. And we outsource a lot of that to Virginia Tech as well.
Great, thank you. Jill, you want to give a brief, I'm putting stars if you noticed, not like Lucky Charms, but I put a star on Jill's. Do you want to give a quick?
Yeah, so our project is about taking small and medium food processors who need to think about preventive controls, but who haven't thought about preventive controls, gradually up to speed. Instead of just taking them and trying to drop them into PCQI and freak them out, we want to sort of gradually move them from a baseline understanding in a staged way up to a deeper understanding of how it could affect their businesses, including costs and the risks of compliance and non-compliance. And the way that we want to do this, and then, after we do that, what we want to do is we want to document a handful of folks as they go through that process so we can create a high quality video at the end that shows other processors what it feels like to go through it, right? To kind of give them a short little video they can watch that we hope will give them some motivation to actually take the plunge themselves. So the way that we structured it is we started off by having what was intended to be in-person sessions, but didn't work out that way because of COVID. But we basically had a 45-minute webinar and then a 3-hour workshop, bringing them up to a place where they were ready to go ahead and get right into the PCQI training, the 3-day training. It was all online, which is very intense. And so far, this project started in February, a year ago, basically. And so far, we've had really kind of astounding success, both with our learning measurements, but also just with our retention. So that we didn't initially recruit as many people as we would hope to, which again, with COVID, it's all online. What are you going to do? But the number of people that we've retained from session to session, so going from webinars to workshop to PCQI, and then the people who want to follow us further for some more in-depth one-on-one and group technical assistance, the retention has been amazing, like 50%, 70%, which is kind of crazy. I've never heard of that before. So I think it's kind of the update. Is that right?
Yeah, that's great. Yep, thank you. Yep. And Nicole, do you want to give a quick shout out on the project we're wrapping up on?
Sure. Hi. So UMass and URI are wrapping up a project that we did a needs assessment of people using shared use facilities or incubator kitchens, and to get at what their needs are, especially around the preventive controls for human food regulation. There was a curriculum that had been developed, and then we modified that curriculum to incorporate more of what they need based on the needs assessment. And we ended up incorporating more of the preventive controls into that curriculum and expanding on some of the components that we taught around product development and food safety. But it's basically product development, food safety considerations from product development through commercialization. We had issues with the title in terms of, if it was around product development, people were thinking more that it was like a product development course. When we said food safety, no one really came. So, we learned a lot in terms of trying to entice the audience. But we're working on developing the online components of this. So this curriculum will be available online. People at shared use facilities and other incubator kitchens will be able to access these modules, and they'll be able to learn about food safety, and we have labeling and product development, the preventive controls for human food. We covered a little bit of GMPs, very basic, but we try to, make it so that when they do come to preventive controls, they're not completely overwhelmed. They've heard of some of the terminology and been exposed to some of the preventive concepts that are common in the food safety world.
Thanks, Nicole. Is there any other projects from the group that's here today that have a past or current FSOP project they want to share as a quick shout out?
Sure, I will. This is the one by Ann Hamilton. We did this together. She was the lead person, expanding the reach of New Hampshire food safety education and FSMA programs to include value-added processors. So we had some good success with our CGMP class. It was mostly a CGMP class. We did have our FSMA expert on staff talked to them about FSMA and how to figure out if they were covered by preventive controls or not. But mostly we developed, and I'll put it in I'll find the link and put it in the chat. We did we turned the CGMP rule regulation into a series of questions that you ask. It's like 17 pages of questions, but we broke it down into each piece, and we did case studies and actual like writing of SOPs for different parts. It was really hands-on. It was 2 days, and we got great feedback. People really, when we followed up 6 months later, and people really made changes, which was fantastic. Yeah, so I'll put the our CGMP spreadsheet that we used in the chat.
Great, thanks, Mary.
Welcome.
I attended that course. I can second. It was fantastic.
Oh, that's right, you did. Yes, thanks, Chris.
Yeah, excellent. And so coincidentally, I was in the breakout room a second ago with Annie, and we were just talking about, it seems like our resource materials, it would be helpful to kind of map out what content already exists, because we, Mary, at Mass, we've given shout outs to your program so that folks can take that as a starting point, depending on where they are in their business, versus the new and emerging one that Nicole just talked about, right? So it's kind of interesting to see where a lot of the stuff exists. It's just a matter of leveraging it appropriately. Great. Okay. Does anyone else have any other programs to share?
Proposed or current?
We're going to move to the proposed in a second.
All right.
Okay. Thanks, Luke. Okay. So now, if no one else has a project to share, the idea was just kind of give a limelight of, hey, these are the types of projects, preventive controls related projects that FSOP has funded in the past. And, we're hoping the stars are aligned. Hopefully you guys are seeing what we're trying to put down in terms of today's program, about thinking about what we have and where the opportunities are. So what I'd like to do in a second is in your chat box, you'll see, kind of like we did in the breakout sessions, we're going to have a little space to share our ideas in a moment. But how we're going to do it is we're not going into a breakout room just to kind of jazz it up. We're going rogue, and we're going to just have a discussion and break it out into 3 different spots. So the first part will be, what do we think in general are some project opportunities that would best support small and medium processors affected by FSMA? And we'll also have some space if anyone has any specific project pitches that they have that you're looking to actually lead, but you might need collaborators to help it. And or if there's people in the room that are supportive of certain projects, but they don't have the bandwidth or capacity to lead or be a part of it, or they still want to show their support. So that's kind of how we positioned this here. So before we jump into that, does anyone have any questions? All right, so then I'm going to stop sharing my screen if I can figure out how to do it, and move on to our the Google Drive that I put in on the chat box, and you'll see the same thing here. You got it in the chat, right? FSOP discussion. And I'm simply just trying to use this space as a forum to collect notes. So that is pretty much all that I have in terms of how we're gonna roll. But I guess kind of thinking back about a second ago, we talked about, or a few minutes ago rather, we talked about what resources might already exist, right? I don't know about you all, but in my group, we also started to get into a little bit of a griping session of what doesn't exist. Like, well, what we really need is, did anyone else have that? I'm looking at some of your faces like, yeah, that happened too. And we have like, wait, we're focusing on what does exist. But now here's your chance. So, you're welcome. I'm in the Google Drive. I'm having a hard time driving with 3 different screen sessions, right? So I want to look at you as people, but I have the Google Drive open, and if you feel comfortable, just bring it and we'll put it on this paper. Or you can, if you feel more comfortable, you can put it in the chat box and one of us will put it in this space, or you can just put it in directly. So going back to Luke, I'm gonna give a shout out to you first of this is the time now of, do we see any projects that needs that would fulfill our stakeholders? Do you have anything to add?
Well, this is a project that I've been thinking about for a while and haven't found a solution to it, but I'm not sure what it's going to take to put it together. And it's based on the assumption that the Better Process Control School is inadequate for small, very small processors who use primarily glass containers, and that they need something that will actually teach them things they can use. The current course is heavily slanted towards metal cans. I know they're redoing it, but it's still going to be slanted towards metal cans and mostly low acid stuff. And so I always feel a little funny about getting, and I've heard this too from smaller processors, that there's nothing in this course for them, or very little.
Yeah.
And so that's the assumption there. And we're finding in Pennsylvania a lot of Amish people who are doing and these are sizable canning operations. And yes, it is covered under another regulation, 21 CFR 114, right?
Yeah.
But they are also covered under 117. And so that's the hooker. That's the catch, I guess, for this particular program. And so it would have, there's things they need to do besides register with FDA. They need to also have the other components, whether or not they're exempt. So,
are you willing to lead this initiative?
God, I don't know. I'm scared to death to get a grant at this university because they screwed up.
All right, I'm gonna level here of okay, so I'm going to try to keep it focused here. So now I'm sounding like an auctioneer, but what I hear here is that Luke Laborde's got an idea of Better Process Control School for acidified canned foods, complying, integrating with CFR 117. Am I hearing this correct? Do we have any show of hands or shout outs or thumbs up if this is a relevant idea?
Well, if that's not that you want to commit to anything, but is this a relevant idea? Some people don't work with acidified canners.
Yeah, you're getting lucky charms out here, Luke, and I have to agree. As a person, I would agree that the idea has legs. So I guess the other shout out here, just would anyone, I'm going to try to move this a little bit far and maybe can use this as a channel to go into our networking in a session, but is there anyone that has interest in this type of project that would want to kind of match make and have a further discussion with Luke at a later time? Yes, no, maybe so.
It's pretty.
Sure.
I just took the Better Process Control School. This is Kathy.
Kathy.
And I took it in December, I think, from Consumer Brands Association, and they did a pretty good job with the acidified foods. But I'm also wondering, we talk about acidified foods and acid foods, and I know that isn't something that small producers understand the difference of.
Well, that's an individual component. But you said
I understand it, but I think there's something in there that if you could use that idea as well as the 117, that might be a way to promote it as something separate.
Well, the kicker would be they're learning about these things, but it also get the FDA certification because they would have to go through the approval process.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so for the sake of today's conversation, though, like all right, great. One down. This is a great idea, and I have full channels here. And Luke, I'm going to put my name on that too because it's something that I'd be interested in trying to hearing more about making something work on that one. Is there anyone else that would like to kind of have a further conversation on that one? All right, put it in either the chat or the Google, and we'll move on for a second. Does anyone? I'm gonna hit Sam Alkane up because he said something quickly about you had an idea about office hours with food safety plans. Did you want to talk anything here on that?
So for for that was kind of how do we translate the the in-person coaching, which was I thought was really great and engaging, into a more robust online format, and in a way that one of the challenges with the coaching workshop was that it was 2 8-hour days, right, which is, at least for small processors, is still a lot of time to give up during your week. So is there a way to kind of spread that out over time, and then put it in a format with the office hours, because they're reoccurring? They allow continuous engagement, and then kind of driving, because like one of the cool things that happened with when we did our workshop in Maine was that the Maine group there for the next several months had like accountability kind of meetings afterwards, and so kind of figuring out how to drive that online with a bunch of experts across the country, so not everybody, it's not resting on just one person's shoulder, and that it's repeating so that people come back and maintain their engagement and their interest in food safety. So that's kind of what was one of the areas that I was thinking about would be like the next extension of what
So that's funny to say that, because Christina put in the chat box, we're using a model similar to that in the next part of the project that Jill was just talking about, where we did this training, and now we have we're doing one-on-one consults to build plans with 5 diversified plans to get exercise, to help teach as models for the future.
Yep.
But then all these other people, we knew we wanted to give them help too, but we don't have the capacity to make 30 plans. Right. So we set up once a month, one component. So this week's just preliminary steps. Yes. Next month, come with that, and we'll talk about the next homework and try to space it out over a few months or a few weeks. But I think that idea is pretty awesome. So does anyone have any comments or suggestions for Sam on this idea about the office hours? I think that's an interesting one as well. No?
Well, I'll just say that I think it's a great idea, and I think it's a great model, and I wish now that we had called it office hours instead.
I know, it would have been a lot less work.
But we just sent the email, so I feel like we can't change it. But I will say that, I don't know, Christina, I feel like it might be an interesting thing for you to think about. And I think the fact that you have put so much effort into content for these, that could be a really nice fit with what Sam is talking about. Just sort of marrying the content and sort of thinking of this as more of an ongoing thing with, the other stuff that they've already done too. So just as a suggestion to kind of think of how we can use that stuff more in the future.
Yeah. And I think on the project that Nicole was talking about earlier, I believe on the needs assessment, something similar was something that small processors indicated they would like in terms of some of that more targeted kind of help along the way with some of those processes. And I think that was something that came up at some of the meetings when we were trying to design course content as well. So it definitely seems like there's a strong need there.
And to the point in the chat box that SC said, yes, that's something that we're talking about for ours, is to target each office hour with a specific topic, right? And then rotate through the topics like every month. So hold 2 sessions a week, rotate through, maybe some more frequent than others, right? Hazard analysis maybe more often than, say, record keeping, but to make sure that it's in the rotation so people can come in and come out and come back. Yep.
Well, Sam, so if you, just to kind of lean on that, we're going to be a victim of this in a different entity, right? Where it's happening right now. So if you want to give a lifeline later about what worked and didn't work for your grant, let us know. And or if you're thinking about partners in the region, that would be great too.
Just one comment to all of this. When you think about this, think about the word sustainability. So once the money is gone, what are you going to do? Right. And so, and think about time and effort and what kind of huge network you might need to keep this sustainable. Right. So it's just, just think that through, have an idea about when the money's over, the question is, what are you going to do and how are you going to keep it going? And so that's the only thing that I would caution, because I think that's just a great idea. I can't, I just, have an ongoing kind of thing like that where people can just plug in as they need it, but eventually the money's going to go away. So what are you going to do?
Right. Thank you, Sam. And thank you, Laura. That's some good input. The funny part is, I think there's more to this conversation, but we thought we didn't know how this was going to go. So I guess I would like to propose, in sensitivity of our agenda, that we're rubbing up against the 3 o'clock to the networking session. But if anyone wanted to stay on for about 5 or so more minutes to kind of capture some of these ideas a little bit further, I would welcome you to stay. To that end, I guess I wanted to kind of give, I have a product pitch. I'm working with Jason Bolton, Hob Machado, and Clint Stevenson about environmental monitoring and sanitation at large. And we know, so for example, Luke's got a great program on sanitation online, and there's a lot of other great programs with EMP. Sam, you've got one, right, at Cornell, the EMP stuff. But what we found, or what I found working with small processors, those things are awesome if you can get them there. But to even get the idea of these types of programs lighter is easier, like appetizer kind of components. So we're talking about hands-on or virtual-based learning that engages some of the more basic concepts of these components, like implementing a SOP, regardless if it's an SSOP, and going a little bit more basic about these concepts so that they can be on-ramped to adopt them in full programming later, is kind of the thing we're looking at. And how to do that yet, we're in stillness of discussion, but I guess I'm looking for raising your awareness in terms of, I feel like it's a need, particularly, Beth talked earlier about environmental monitoring is kind of a knowledge gap that we've noticed in some of our surveys, as well as in some of the resource component. So I'm looking for, supporters, and take any critical feedback if anyone's got anything in that end.
I just think, Amanda, the one thing is also to pull on that conversation from the FDA when they were on the line earlier about one of the biggest problems with people is the environmental monitoring program, like when they go to enact it and not doing swabbing, right? So there's obviously a need for it.
Oh yeah, right. In terms of like the concept versus the actual execution. That's a good, thanks, Beth. Thank you. Anything else on that?
Just a side point. We lost a lot of people on this. Is this going to get out to everyone? Can't expect this to volunteer for everything.
Yeah, I'm gonna draft up the notes of today's discussion, and I have some contacts based on some of the conversation that we've been having here. Yeah. And again, it won't be exhaustive, but the idea here was just going to shake it up of, hey, remember, FSOP's due April 1st, and usually you need collaborations. I'd rather have my ideas think now in front of you instead of writing a 20-page paper. So Lori, I guess, a shout out to Lori of, hey, warning, there's a sniff test that I would worry as a reviewer. I personally found that really valuable. So thank you for that. So yeah.
I'll throw out one more thing, not for this cycle, because it's close, but for next year, and I don't know how many other people it's on their radar and impacts them, and maybe it's just because I'm a dairy guy, but the traceability rule, right? And when that finally becomes implemented, I know, right, it's out for comments, but like there's a whole new set of lingos and much more requirements around that. We'll see what ends up being the final requirements, but that might be something for next year. To keep on the radar as far as reaching out and developing training materials around that for small processors, because I know a lot of people are already beginning to be concerned about it.
I'm putting it in as a cycle note. Thank you, Sam. Okay. Any other comments or suggestions, or just shout outs of things that you might support, but not necessarily willing to lead or wanting to lead, any of those things? No? Okay, then I'm going to leave the awkward pause as we're kind of done, and now it's time to go socialize. So thank you all for your participation today, and giving the floor to have some food for thought about some future projects. We welcome you to really use the tables these networking tables in the but in order to do that, you have to hop off this and then go into the networking room, and then you pick a table and it says chat, and then you get into this room there. If you haven't done it yet, just to brace yourself if you didn't do the poster session. So, all right. Well, thank you all. Have a good one.